Hello, dear YouTube viewers. I hope you're doing well. Okay, so let's start our video. The kitchen was warm with the smell of dinner, the faint hiss of food on the stove, and the quiet hum of a man's thoughts as he waited for his wife. He moved almost tenderly, setting the table for two, imagining her walking through the door with her usual tired smile. But when she did arrive, there was no warmth in her eyes, no weariness softened by affection, just a sharp curve of her lips, a smirk that carried something cruel beneath it. Without hesitation, without a flicker of doubt, she said, "Tonight I'm leaving for someone else. Don't wait for me." The words dropped like lead into the silence, breaking the air between them. For a moment, his body refused to react. The room spun, his ears rang, and his heart seemed to stumble in his chest. Her casual cruelty was worse than anger. It was dismissal, as though their years together were nothing more than smoke easily blown away. He stared at her, searching for a trace of hesitation, some sign that she was bluffing. His voice cracked when he finally managed to ask, "Is this a joke?" But her eyes, steady and cold, gave him the answer before her lips did. She turned away, unbothered, pulling a small suitcase from the closet and beginning to pack with mechanical calm. She hummed softly to herself, a tune that made his stomach twist, as though she was mocking the devastation unraveling inside him. Every object she picked up, clothes, perfume, her favorite scarf, was a memory of laughter, of whispered promises, of mornings spent together. Each item she dropped into the bag seemed to erase another piece of the life they had built. He felt helpless, pinned between disbelief and a rising tide of rage, but no words would come. When she finally zipped the bag shut and walked to the door, she didn't even look back. The slam echoed through the house, and then there was only silence, thick and merciless. He sank onto the couch, his body heavy as if it belonged to someone else. His hands shook as he pressed them against his face, but the tears came anyway, burning hot. Anger flared in his chest, colliding with sorrow, leaving him hollow and breathless. The question circled endlessly in his mind. What did I do wrong? He replayed the months leading up to this night, noticing details that now screamed at him. Her phone always face down. The quick excuses when she had to step out, the faint smell of a stranger's cologne that he had convinced himself was nothing. How blind he had been, how eager to trust. The memories twisted cruelly against him. Their wedding day, her smile brighter than sunlight, the countless evenings of laughter, the quiet moments of comfort that now felt like lies. He reached for a bottle on the table and drank until the fire in his throat dulled the ache in his chest. The alcohol blurred the edges of the room, but not the sharp sting of her words. He wondered if she had ever really loved him, or if it had all been a long, elaborate pretense until something better came along. His head dropped back against the couch. Eyes fixed on the ceiling, he could barely see through the haze of tears. The house, once alive with her presence, was now just walls and furniture, silent witnesses to his collapse. The night stretched endlessly, leaving him with nothing but questions that would not be answered, and the crushing weight of a love that had shattered in the span of a single smirk. Morning came like a question he couldn't answer. He woke to the same apartment, the same light leaking through the curtains, but everything felt wrong. Smaller, colder, as if the walls had tightened around him. The first thing he did was reach for his phone, fingers fumbling, heart racing with the ridiculous hope that she would have texted, called, left some trace that tonight had been a terrible joke. The screen lit up with the usual spam messages, a notification about a sale, a calendar reminder he had set weeks ago. Nothing from her. He refreshed the messages again and again, each pull of the screen a fresh sting. Every missed call on the list felt like an accusation. He imagined her name glowing on the display like a promise. Each time it didn't appear, the disappointment wrapped tighter. When the urge to call became unbearable, he almost did, thumb hovering above her name, rehearsing a million things to say, please, jokes, apologies, bargaining. Then he remembered the cold simplicity of her voice. Don't wait for me. Those words, polite and final, sat between them like a wall. He lowered the phone and watched the seconds pass, heavy as wet wool. Instead, he scrolled through their old photos, vacations under two bright suns, grainy pictures from their wedding, late-night selfies where they both looked deliriously happy. He read their old texts the way some people read letters from a lost lover, searching for clues, looking for the moment it had all started to change. In the messages, he found warmth and silly plans and the ordinary smallness of love. He found nothing to explain why she had left. The more he searched, the more fiercely he clung to the past, as if sheer insistence could stitch their life back together. Friends called with soft, mechanical sympathy. Give it time, one said. People make mistakes. Another offered. They recommended distractions. Coffee, games, the numbing comfort of other people's company. He nodded through the calls, grateful for the noise, but he resented every suggestion that implied surrender. Letting go felt like erasing her existence, as if that would be easier than waiting with the unbearable hope that she might come back. She'll come back, he told anyone who would listen, mostly himself, because hope was the only limb he had left to stand on. Then one evening, while he was idly scrolling through the endless, indifferent stream of other people's lives, he froze. There she was, in a picture that made his breath catch as though someone had slammed a fist against his ribs. She stood beside a man he didn't know, laughing with a looseness she had never shown with him. The caption was light, casual. The comments bloomed with emojis and friendly banter. Her smile in that photograph cut deeper than anything she had said that night, because it suggested she had already moved into a new world where he didn't exist. Rage rose like bile, hot and uncontrollable. How could she move on so quickly? He shouted at the empty room, voice cracking. He imagined walking up to the man in the photo and tearing the smile off his face, imagined every insult that might make the other man's eyes drop. He saw himself confronting them in public, watched the scene play out over and over, his humiliation and their bored amusement. But every time he pictured the confrontation, a quieter voice told him he would only become more ridiculous, more small. So he held back. Instead, nights became a blur of pacing and checking, not just his phone now, but the world outside, scanning windows and streetlights for a glimpse of her. Days were hollow machinery. Work, errands, the autopilot of life that kept moving whether he wanted it to or not. His appetite dropped. Food lost its flavor. The act of eating was an obligation he performed without attention. His boss began to notice his mistakes, missed deadlines, half-finished reports, the kind of absent-mindedness that once would have been forgiven but now added another weight to his shoulders. He began turning down invitations, saying he needed to rest, while secretly fearing any place where laughter might remind him of what he had lost. Alcohol became a companion that offered temporary amnesia. He found himself drinking earlier in the evenings, the liquid loosening the edges of his panic just enough for him to sleep and for the morning to come with its terrible, hopeful rituals again. Sometimes, in the small hours, he would lie awake and press his face into the pillow on the side she used to occupy. The scent of her perfume haunted him, a ghostly trace that seemed to linger in the fabric of the sheets long after they had been washed. He would close his eyes and try to imagine her turn in the night, the soft sound she made when she breathed, the weight of her hand against his chest, details that once felt ordinary and safe, and now had the sharpness of relics. At other times, a memory would surface without warning. Her laugh in a crowded room, the way she had once leaned against him during a movie, her casual kindnesses. Each recollection landed like a small pain, and beneath them all an insidious thought took root and grew. You weren't enough. That thought was a pestilent thing. It wormed its way into his days and colored every reflection. He began to blame himself for what she had done. He tallied up faults. The evenings he had been late from work, the nights he had chosen sleep over conversation, the birthdays he hurried through. He hated himself for missing what was happening right in front of him, for choosing comfort over passion, for thinking that a steady hand was the same as love. Sometimes anger flared outward, and he would pace until his legs were leaden with exhaustion. Sometimes it turned inward, a slow gnawing that left him hollowed and quiet. He pictured her in the arms of another man and felt both a primitive fury and an aching, petty jealousy, not only for her body, but for the idea of someone else sharing the private parts of her life that had once belonged to him. He envied the other man, not for his hands or his smile, but for the fact of being the one she wanted. The thought made him feel childishly small and irrationally betrayed all at once. As the days slipped into one another, his life narrowed to waiting and remembering, to the dangerous rituals of checking and imagining. He promised himself he would confront the truth soon, would demand an explanation and some shred of decency. But each time the moment arrived, he faltered, unfamiliar with how to hold anger without letting it break him. The dark spiral tightened, a private gravity pulling him deeper into a space where the world made less sense, and the future, once an open road, had become a tunnel lined with the echoes of her smirk. Weeks passed in a blur of gray days and sleepless nights. He had almost convinced himself she was gone for good, that he would never hear her footsteps on the porch again, when the doorbell rang one late afternoon. His heart betrayed him with a surge of hope, a flicker of the old rhythm. But when he opened the door, she stood there not with softness, but with purpose. A suitcase waited by her side, empty this time, ready to be filled. She stepped inside without asking, as if the house still belonged to her, as if she could walk through its rooms and reclaim pieces of herself at will. He stood frozen, watching her move about with practiced indifference, collecting dresses from the closet, framed photos from the shelves. "Why?" he asked finally, his voice trembling with a mixture of fury and desperation. "Tell me the truth. Don't leave me with ghosts." She paused, her back still turned, then sighed. "I was suffocating," she said, the words sharp, deliberate. "You gave me stability, but I wanted fire. I wanted to feel alive." The sentence fell between them like shattered glass. He felt each shard pierce him, worse than the night she had walked out. Stability, was that all his love had been? Something safe, something dull, a cage disguised as comfort? She turned back to her task, as though the confession had cost her nothing. He swallowed the ache, the sudden emptiness of realizing that in her eyes he had been not a partner but a prison. She left again, suitcase heavy with belongings, and this time he didn't stop her. He sat alone in the silence, her words echoing louder than the closing door. Days later, unable to silence the storm inside him, he did something he hadn't dared before. He followed her. From a distance, careful to remain unseen, he tracked her steps through familiar streets until she arrived at a place he had never been. There, waiting for her, was the man from the photograph. The man who had stolen her smile, or perhaps unlocked a smile she had never given to him. They embraced with ease, laughter spilling between them like wine. She glowed in a way that struck him deeply, an openness, a lightness, as though she had shed an invisible weight the moment she walked away from him. He felt his chest tighten, not only with jealousy but with disbelief. Had she ever looked at him that way? Had her laughter with him ever been so unguarded, so free? The fury rose before he could contain it. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. His voice cracked like a whip. "So, this is it? This is what you left everything for?" They turned. She stiffened, eyes flashing with annoyance, not guilt. The lover, taller and younger, smirked with confidence. "She doesn't need to explain anything," he said coolly. "She chose passion over your boring life. That's all there is to it." The words struck harder than fists. Passion. Boring. 2 words that reduced his years of devotion, sacrifice, late-night care, and quiet loyalty into nothing. His wife said nothing, only looked at him with a kind of pity that burned worse than hatred. He felt humiliation spread over him like a heavy cloak. The argument sputtered. He shouted about vows, about promises, about love, while the lover smiled, and she stayed silent. Finally, with his throat raw and his dignity stripped, he turned and walked away. Each step was heavy, but with each one something shifted inside him, a tiny crack of clarity breaking through the fog. Back in the solitude of his empty house, he sat in the quiet and allowed himself to think, not of her betrayal, not of the lover's mockery, but of the years before the end. He remembered how their conversations had grown shorter, how the spark between them had dimmed into routine. He remembered how he had avoided fights, thinking peace meant silence, thinking that giving her comfort was enough. He realized with painful honesty that while she had chosen betrayal, he had chosen to ignore the cracks forming in their foundation. This realization did not excuse her, but it shifted the weight he had been carrying. For weeks he had believed he wasn't enough, that he had failed entirely. Now he understood. She had wanted something he couldn't give, and instead of asking for it, she had gone searching elsewhere. That was her choice, not his failure. To survive the storm inside him, he picked up a pen. At first the words came in broken fragments, angry sentences, memories scrawled hastily on paper. Soon they became longer, turning into letters addressed to her that he never intended to send. In them, he poured everything he had never said, the depth of his hurt, the confusion, the lingering love that refused to die, and finally, the slow birth of understanding. Writing became a mirror, a way to see himself more clearly. Each page carried some of the poison out of him, leaving space for breath, for the smallest seed of healing. He wrote about the night she left, about the smirk that haunted him. He wrote about the confrontation, the cruel words of her lover, the hollow way she had looked at him. He wrote about his own mistakes, his silence, his desire for peace that had hidden a deeper unrest. He wrote not to win her back, not to change her mind, but to change himself. With every letter unsent, he felt lighter, as though the burden was slowly shifting from his chest to the pages. In those quiet hours, he began to see the truth. The end of their marriage was not only an ending, but also a beginning, though he did not yet know of what. For the first time since she had smirked at him across the kitchen, he felt something other than grief or rage. He felt possibility, a fragile, trembling thing, but alive nonetheless. One night, months after the confrontation that had left him hollow, he stood alone in the living room with a box full of photographs. Their faces stared back at him from glossy paper, smiles from vacations, birthdays, anniversaries, everyday moments captured in still frames. For a long time, he simply stared, torn between the weight of what they had once meant and the poison they carried now. Then, with a trembling hand, he carried them outside. The night was cool, the stars muted, and he lit a small fire in a metal bin. One by one, he fed the photographs into the flames. Her smile curled and blackened, her eyes vanished in smoke, until nothing but ashes remained. It felt like tearing out pieces of himself, but with every photo that disappeared, he felt the faintest release. For the first time, he chose himself, not her, not the ghost of what had been. He chose self-respect over begging, dignity over longing. The change began slowly. He joined a gym, at first pushing himself through routines that felt unnatural, but soon finding strength in the rhythm of his own breath, in the ache of his muscles. He began saying yes when friends invited him out, rediscovering laughter that wasn't forced. He dusted off hobbies he had abandoned, books he had once loved, the guitar that had sat untouched in the corner. His life, once suffocating under the weight of absence, began to fill again, not with her, but with him. For the first time in months, he felt alive. Not because she was there, but because he was. Time passed, and with it came a steadiness he had never known before. Then, one evening, there was a knock at the door. He opened it, and there she stood. Not with a smirk this time, not with the cruel confidence she had carried the night she left, but with tired eyes and a tentative smile. She looked smaller, diminished somehow, as though reality had finally stripped away her illusions. The lover was gone. The fire she had chased had burned out, leaving her with ashes of her own. "I made a mistake," she whispered, voice fragile. "Can we try again?" For a moment, the air between them was thick with memory. He saw her, as she was now, wounded, regretful, but also as she had been. The smirk, the suitcase, the cold words, "Don't wait for me." He felt no surge of rage, no desperate hope. Instead, he felt calm, a clarity that had taken months to find. He looked at her steadily, remembering the nights of drinking, the mornings of despair, the hollow questions that had nearly destroyed him. And then he remembered the fire he had built, the one that had burned her photographs, and with them, his dependence on her love. "I waited once," he said softly, his voice unwavering. "Never again." Her lips parted as if to protest, but he did not wait. He turned from her, each step carrying the weight of finality. The door closed gently behind him, not slammed, not bitter, simply closed. In the silence that followed, he breathed deeply, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. He didn't need her apology. He didn't need her to stay. He had already rebuilt himself from the ruins she had left behind. Later, as the first light of dawn crept across the horizon, he stepped outside. The sky was painted in soft hues of gold and rose, a quiet promise of beginnings. He walked into the sunrise, not with the heavy heart of the man who had been abandoned, but with the steady stride of a man who had chosen himself. Love is not about who leaves, he thought, the words rising in him like a truth finally earned. It's about who chooses to stay. Her betrayal destroyed me, but it also rebuilt me. The sun climbed higher, casting its warmth across his face, and he felt it: freedom, self-worth, and a future unshackled from the shadow of her smirk. He walked forward into his own life, leaving the past behind. Thanks for watching. For more videos, please subscribe. Our channel, Awesome Visuals Story.